All right, guys, welcome back. Deuce Douglas here, and I am still alive. I am still breathing. I know it's been over a month since I last uploaded, and that's been for a couple of reasons. Just been real busy, and as I kind of alluded to in my last videos, I also got kind of burnt out as well. But excuses, we're back, and as you guys can see by the title, it's going to be with some Madden 20 beta impressions. I actually recorded an EA Play impressions video that I wanted to have up before the beta dropped, but with all the craziness of giving out beta codes, it didn't end up going up, so I'm just going to be combining both my EA Play and beta impressions into this one video. So basically, I'm going to break this down into three categories, starting with the good, which is obviously going to cover everything that I liked and what I'm a fan of. Then there will be the neutral, where I'll cover things that I had more mixed feelings about. And then lastly will be the bad. And at this point, I think there's only going to be one or two things in there, but they're pretty big ones, at least for me and how I choose to play the game. So starting with the good, and probably the first thing you notice when you pick up and play the game, and that's going to be real player motion. I know that this was something that caught a lot of flack and pretty much became a meme this past year with Madden 19, but when I first played Madden 20, you could literally feel the difference on the kick return, and as you play more, it just feels so much better than 19, and the term that I would use, and the term you've probably already seen elsewhere, is fluid. It's more swervy than 19 in that you have more control over your player without making a hard cut every time you want to turn, but it's not like some of the recent Maddens where you could basically turn at full speed with no regard for physics or acceleration and deceleration. I've always missed that player movement from the old Xbox PS2 Maddens just from a fluidity standpoint, and from what I've played, it feels a lot like that. There's still going to be some weird moments in places like catching and turning upfield where it feels pretty robotic and clunky, but overall it was something that you can immediately feel and something that is one of my favorite changes to the game that I've seen. Moving along to the next good thing, which is going to be the XFactors and abilities, and this was actually something that in my EA Play impressions that I recorded was in the neutral category because I was really positive on abilities but not as much on XFactors, and I do still kind of feel that way. With the XFactors, there was a lot of worry around them being too gamey and arcadey, and honestly I had the same kind of feeling when I heard about them, in that it almost felt like something out of Overwatch or Specialists from Call of Duty, but after playing, I think a lot of that worry wasn't really warranted. The Mahomes bazooka ability got a lot of attention, but I played the whole weekend with him and it wasn't something that completely changed the game or was really a factor at all, and for the most part the XFactors themselves don't really come into play as much as you might think. I think the target or goal for them to be able to pop was about once per game, and for Mahomes that was pretty accurate, and then with Travis Kelce, I think over 8 or 9 franchise games I only got him on fire once or twice, and I think that's kind of the double-edged sword with these abilities, in that you don't want players to be on fire the entire time and constantly using some of these abilities because some of them are really powerful, but on the other hand, if guys never get in the zone, it's kind of like, what's the point of them being there? And then like I said, I was a lot more positive when it came to the abilities because those are the ones that are always active and you will see them factor into gameplay a lot more, and while this year the focus of them is more around stars feeling like stars, I think it's a good base to expand upon and continue emphasizing player differentiation, which is something that I always like to see. Another good thing that I was a huge fan of is the changes to pass trajectories and pass leading. It feels so much better to be able to trust your eyes, and there are a ton of throws that I've made in Madden 20 already that just aren't possible or that you can't even consider in Madden 19, and this is right up there with the changes to RPM as possibly my favorite change to the game. And then a more under the radar change that I did enjoy was the changes to tackling, and for those of you that don't know, the window for tackling has become a lot smaller and you have to be a lot more precise when going for tackles. So going back to those older Xbox PS2 Maddens that I was talking about where you basically had to collide and run into a player to tackle them, that's more of what Madden 20 feels like, as opposed to Madden 19 where you basically just tried to get to within a couple yards of a player and basically mash conservative tackle. It's one of those things that I think just feels a lot better and is more rewarding, but another thing I think it does is it just makes the game look a lot better. You don't see as many of those warp tackles where because you are close enough to create an interaction, the game basically forces an animation that often looks awkward or, like I said, involves warping players into tackle animations. It's definitely something that takes some getting used to, and there will be times where you're really close to guys and you won't get a tackle animation, which can be frustrating, but overall I much prefer this type of of tackling to what Madden 19 has had. And then the last good thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be the most intensely debated topic, and that is obviously the pass rush. Some love it, some hate it, and the decision that gets made on how to handle it by the devs is going to be something that, in my opinion, can dictate how well Madden 20 is received. My opinion is that I loved it. Yes, getting sacked is frustrating. Yes, not being able to throw bombs every other play isn't as fun, but at the same time, that's football, and I enjoy the strategy that a constant pass rush presence brings, and I've had zero issue with it in my time with Madden 20. Another thing with this is that I don't think a lot of people understand the potential butterfly or domino effect when it comes to making reactionary changes like that, because I can tell you right now that if pass rush gets nerfed, it's going to be almost impossible to stop anything, because coverage and defense as a whole is unbelievably soft right now. And I think when it comes to the pass rush, that's the one negative that I would have, is that it almost feels like the pass rush is as strong as it is to make up for the fact that defense is so incredibly soft elsewhere. But like I said, I was a big fan of the pass rush, and if you're not a fan of it and want it changed, I'll just say be careful what you wish for. Moving on to a couple of things that I was more neutral on and more so had pretty mixed feelings about, we're going to be starting with the quick presentation, and I'm speaking to the elimination of the walk up to the line when it comes to breaking the huddle and running to the line when it comes to hurry up. On one hand, I did like it because it's going to shave quite a bit of time off of games, and a normal game that consisted of 15-minute quarters and around 120 to 130 plays would normally take me around an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes in Madden 19, and that's now been taking me around just over an hour, which in my opinion is a good thing. I think Madden presentation has always been pretty lackluster, so getting rid of all the shots of coaches and useless replays means that not a whole lot of value was lost in terms of presentation, at least in my opinion. That being said, my biggest issues are when it comes to the hurry up. I've played games against the CPU in the beta and then against users at EA Play, and when you're on defense going against the hurry up, you don't really have much time to do anything at all, because it just goes from being tackled to transitioning with everyone at the line, and it just feels really awkward and unnatural. So when it comes down to it, I love it under normal circumstances just because of the time that will be saved, and the pace of the game feels a lot better in terms of spending more time playing than watching, but I really don't like how it feels during hurry up situations. And if it came down to it, I think I would prefer a more robust and authentic presentation package than what we saw in Madden 19, as well as the approach that's being taken in Madden 20, which is why this is going to end up in the neutral section. And then the other thing in the neutral section is going to be the RPOs, and this is something that and I'm sure a lot of people were immediately worried about from the jump, with the thought that they were either going to be broken, overpowered, both, and or not even be worth using. And I will say that they were executed a lot better than I was expecting. This is one of those things that I honestly thought was years off and possibly might not ever actually make it into the game, but I will say they feel really well done for it being the first year of their implementation. It's something that when you make the right read and are able to hit a slant or break a screen, it feels really nice and rewarding, and I've had a lot of fun using them, especially in the red zone. And then the addition of ineligible downfield penalties is a great touch to add some realism and balance to them as well. And while that side of things is positive, as I've played more, it's become pretty apparent that the CPU isn't very good at running RPOs, and when it came to any of the RPOs with built-in screens, they were borderline awful. The ones with slants, they'd be able to run without much of an issue, but on the screens, the CPU basically just takes the snap and throws immediately, which results in every one of them actually being a running play, which means if the receiver drops the pass or a defender gets in to knock it away, it then becomes a fumble. On top of that, when they do make the catch, they have a lot of trouble turning upfield and gaining yardage, so most of the time it either results in no gain at best or a big loss at worst. I also ran into issues late in games where the CPU would be in a situation where they should just be bleeding the clock, but would constantly throw on RPOs rather than just handing it off like they should. And I'm going to use that to kind of segue into the negatives portion of the video, where I want to talk about the user versus CPU experience. And I know that's a really broad topic, and I'm going to try to keep this somewhat short because I don't want to go ranting and be too negative. But the more that I've thought about it, I don't really think this is so much to do with Madden 20 specifically, so much as it's a culmination of the experience having issues new and old, year in and year out for the last several iterations. And for the beta, the user CPU experience, at least for me, was not very good at all. I already talked about the RPOs and the CPU's trouble with them, but some other things that I noticed were that every single team I played took pretty much the exact same approach with play calling, which was to be very pass heavy, Throughout all the franchise games I played, the CPU was passing upwards of 70% of the time and only running about 30% of the time. And that was something that really stood out late in games where basically, unless it was time to kneel the clock out completely, the CPU would just continue to throw and throw and throw, even in obvious run situations. And then even playing a team like the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, they were throwing 40 plus times and only running maybe 10 or 15. And I'm hoping this is just a beta issue and that come launch, teams will be playing more closely to themselves and be more varied. But at this point, I don't really have a lot of confidence that that will be the case. Some other issues that I ran into, I was playing the Lions and there was a play where they were at their own 5-yard line and Stafford took the snap, looked to throw, and then just dropped right out of the back of the end zone for the safety without there being any kind of pressure. Against the Raiders, they ran a fake punt where the punter took the snap and looked to throw, but then just held onto the ball and took a 20-yard sack for the turnover. The CPU's decision making still leaves a lot to be desired, and there was one game where the computer kicked a field goal which ended up being short, then a couple of drives later decided to line up for an even further field goal, which again ended up short. I also dealt with situations where the computer would just let the clock run out before half or run a play to actually run the clock out before half rather than using timeouts to kick a field goal. Punters will still willingly kick the ball 10 yards out of the back of the end zone for touchbacks. And overall, playing the computer still feels far more robotic than intuitive. And despite all of the positive improvements, the base experience still feels very similar to 19 in my opinion. And it's a beta, I get it, but like I said, most of that stuff isn't new and it's stuff that we've been dealing with for the past several iterations of Madden. And it's really disappointing because I love the changes to RPM. I love the changes to passing. I really like what superstar XFactors and abilities add to the game. For the most part, I would say this is probably the best that all Madden has felt in a really long time. The amount of warping and quote all Madden shenanigans have been significantly reduced. But for me, while I think gameplay is in a much better place than Madden 19, I wasn't really having fun or enjoying playing games. And all of those little things that by themselves aren't huge issues have piled up and kind of soiled an otherwise improved experience for me. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the simulation game style. And this is a lot like the user CPU experience in that it's not so much to do with Madden 20 specifically as it just is a culmination of the setting not really moving forward or progressing. And from my experience this year more than ever, you can feel how heavily the game is built around head-to-head play without much consideration for playing any other way. And rather than that simulation setting feeling different or more like a realistic ratings-driven experience, it basically just feels exactly like the competitive setting except with fatigue on and then some randomness sprinkled in as well. So every game in the beta that I played was on the simulation game style and the completion percentages for both me and the computer were incredibly high, and playing on all Madden, it didn't really feel like there was any kind of way to fix it. I played a bunch of games on 50 for quarterback accuracy and the CPU's completion percentage was around 79%, and I actually played back-to-back games where they were 42 of 47 and then one where they were 41 of 49 before I finally decided I had to change it. So I bumped it all the way back to 20, which is where I've had it on Madden 19, and in those few games that I played on it, that number only dropped a couple of points to around 76%, and no matter what I had it on, it felt impossible to create any kind of a realistic passing game. And as a result of that, playing guys like Lamar Jackson really doesn't feel a whole lot different than playing Brady, Mahomes, or Aaron Rodgers, and part of that definitely has to do with all Madden, but a good part of that as well is that there is also so little respect to ratings. I actually went through and edited a quarterback that I was playing to have only 60 for short, medium, and deep throw accuracy, and while it did create some inaccuracies, he still ended up completing nearly 70% of his passes. And then even as the user on all Madden, the differences between using someone like Lamar Jackson versus a Patrick Mahomes just doesn't feel wide enough, or at least as wide as I'd like it to be. A couple other things, penalties were virtually non-existent, and through the 9 or 10 games of a franchise that I played, I think I only had 7 penalties, and almost every single one of them was a face mask. The amount of hit sticks and fumbles as a result was also far higher than you ever see in actual NFL games. And I guess the best way that I can describe it is that when I was playing, it didn't really feel like I was playing football so much as it felt like I was playing playing Madden ball, and that's fine for those that enjoy that style of game, but for me, I don't want to play Madden ball. I don't want to play a game that just because it's a clean pocket, Lamar Jackson suddenly turns into Peyton Manning every throw, or because Derwin James has 91 hit power, every time he makes a tackle, it's him detonating the ball carrier and constantly forcing fumbles. And I think the beta has really opened my eyes to the fact that the type of game that I want Madden to be and the type of game that it's becoming are getting farther and farther apart. And to be brutally honest, I don't know if I see myself playing much of Madden 20, if at all. I've already been at a point the last couple years where I was more so having to look for a reason to play the game rather than playing it because I enjoyed it. And with where franchise is going to be this year, it's going to make wanting to put time into it even harder. I might try to make it work again this year just because I do enjoy making franchise videos and I do enjoy creating content. But like I said, I'm kind of past the point of wanting to make things work or trying to make things work rather than just being able to sit down, pick up, and play and enjoy the game. But I think that pretty much covers everything. I know that was probably a little bit weird where I was so positive about a lot of things and then basically ended by saying that I'll hardly be playing the game at all. But that's pretty much exactly how I feel. I think if you play a lot of head-to-head or aren't bothered by some of those legacy issues, it's going to be a really nice step up from Madden 19 because there are a lot of gameplay changes that feel really good and make playing the game more fun. But as someone who has no real desire to play head-to-head, I can already tell it's going to be a really tough time for me to have a lot of fun with the game. If there's anything that I didn't touch on that you'd like to know more about, do not hesitate to ask and I'll leave some more impressions in the comments. I'll have another video at some point here soon with some pre-release franchise impressions where I'll have a lot to say about franchise mode, so that should be fun. But that's going to do it here. I apologize for the inconsistencies in my upload schedule and really appreciate you guys sticking with me and tuning in. And as always, thanks for watching.